bathrooms, has a 14,000 square foot basement. Mr. Hearst had wanted to put a bowling alley in the basement, which was never finished. This would be a difficult undertaking for any architect. And yet, Mr. Hearst was very progressive to choose a woman. In 1919, women didn't even have the right to vote. Julia Morgan's very first project was the Campanelle Bell Tower in Oakland, the women's college there. It was 72 feet tall, made of reinforced steel and concrete. 1906, there was a big earthquake in San Francisco. Wiped out about 80% of San Francisco. But her bell tower still stands. The Fairmont Hotel was so severely damaged in that earthquake that most thought it was hopeless. And yet, it was Julia Morgan that they commissioned. She re-engineered and redesigned that 600-room hotel. Came in under budget and on time, and the hotel opened on the 1-year anniversary of the earthquake. 2 years ahead of every other architect in San Francisco rebuilding San Francisco. You know, that hotel was off of its foundation by 7 feet and completely gutted with fire. It was quite an accomplishment. So while she never granted interviews, she was starting to become very well known because the journalists were starting to pay attention to who Julia Morgan was. So when she and Mr. Hearst were starting to talk about Casa Grande and the guest cottages, he was she's an honest person to get her degree in architecture, but they have never had accepted any men in their program, and they weren't about to start. So for 3 years, they made it very difficult for her. Finally, the third year that she took the entrance exam, she was 13 out of more than 300 applicants, and they could no longer deny her entry. But by then, she was 27 years old. The school rules said she had to be done with the program by the time she was 30, and it was a 6-year program. But Julia Morgan did that 6-year program in 3 years, and she had to learn French and metric. She was hazed and belittled by her male classmates, but she still graduated with honors. And we'll be on our way. In 1922, King Tut's tomb was discovered, and the whole country went Egyptomania. Now, Mr. Hearst typically collected artwork from the Renaissance time period, but this is one of those times he went off the rails, kind of being trendy as an art collector. These 4 pieces were purchased at 3 different times from 3 different art collectors. They're between 32 and 3,600 years old. So when I'm talking about in the days of Moses, that's how old they are. They're made of diorite, which is a super hard stone. On a scale of 1 to 10, diamonds being a 10, diorite's about an 8. That material that you see in the top one, that's not a crack or a break. That's a natural occurring material called feldspar in diorite. But Julia Morgan designed the fountain that displays Mr. Hearst's Sekhmet architecture, right down to the detail of the lotus flowers and the pyramids, not only on the fountain, but also on the stair risers on either side. She designed all of the tiles that you see here at the hilltop. Now, right over here, to your right and down the hill is a cul-de-sac. That's where the guests would be dropped off when they came for a visit. And Mr. Hearst had hundreds of guests here. They would come either by steamer, maybe their own yacht, or by plane, or by train, and be picked up in San Luis Obispo. They'd come up these stairs, give a hi to Sekhmet, and then up to the main terrace to get their room assignment for their visit here. In 1926, they would separate but never divorce. He took up with a young Ziegfeld Follies dancer named Marion Davies, and their relationship became public when she was about 18 and he 52. Marion Davies was not only a dancer and singer, but she was also an actress. And with Mr. Hearst's influence and money, she became a very popular actress in the 20s. Now, being such a young girl here at the Hilltop, she'd get bored. Mr. Hearst was busy with his empire, and so she would invite friends from Hollywood. So A-list actors and actresses would come here and hang out with her, enjoy the swimming pool, had a stable full of horses, the largest private zoo in the country, tennis courts, and Mr. Hearst loved for his guests to enjoy the Hilltop. So Marion Davies, his girlfriend, remained as his girlfriend for about 38 years until Mr. Hearst passed away. And she would entertain the guests at that first social obligation here in the assembly room. Apparently she was unbeatable at Monopoly, which was a new game back then. They'd do puzzles, played poker, and this room was the social room of the house, and you would have two watered-down cocktails. This wasn't an environment for a bunch of drinking. Mr. Hearst had no longer was a drinker after his college days. He saw how some of drinking had really ruined the lives of his friends in college, so he quit drinking and didn't allow people to get drunk here at the castle. In fact, if he found out that his guests did get drunk, they would find their suitcases packed and outside their door, and the taxi waiting to take them down the hill. If you tried to smuggle alcohol here, he would confiscate the alcohol and return it to you later on. But it wasn't that kind of place. It wasn't a big party. Kind of across the top of the room with these antique windows. See the OG archway at the top of the windows, and also at the top of these Spanish fire stalls behind you and behind me. And there's another one here, the 15th century Raja fire. Now these OG archways draw your eye up, but it's actually an optical illusion. The room is wider than it is tall. In front of you is some of Mr. Hearst's silver collection. He had to sell off a large portion. He was once had the greatest silver collection in the country, but in the 30s he had to liquidate much of his assets because he was about $100 million in debt. So $150,000 of the silver collection was sold during that time. We still have a shelf. Now with all of this opulence, why is there ketchup and mustard bottles and paper napkins on the table? Well, you see, there are no kitchens in any of the guest cottages. The only kitchen is here in Casa Grande, right through that door. Mr. Hearst said, this isn't a hotel. You're not going to get room service. He wanted everyone to come together at night for dinner. Now, if you're on your vacation, you could sleep in, come in, and have breakfast and lunch, whatever you wanted to, but dinner was everyone together. It was kind of a throwback from those Camp Hill days, the family dinner. And so the ketchup and mustard bottles were a symbol of the family dinner, a casual dinner that we're having in this very opulent room. Now, Mr. Hearst would sit right here in the middle. His girlfriend, Mary Davies, across from him. And if you were of newsworthy importance or someone that Mr. Hearst would like to get to know better, you'd find a switchboard operator 24/7 to look up connection, no dial on the telephone. So that was the only way of communicating here was the 100 telephones. Now, I mentioned that Mr. Hearst, when he was just 10 years old, his mother, Evie Aberson, took him on a European tour for 18 months. That's when his love for art and history and architecture started. His dream started when he was just 10 years old. And he told his mother that he wanted to have houses like he was seeing in Europe, those palaces and museums. He said, wouldn't it be amazing to have rooms like this in our own house? So his dream started when he was just a little guy. And of course, as an only child, and the sole heir of a huge fortune, actually, that dream come true. His father had the first largest silver strike here in California, or in Nevada. But when they came back from that tour of Europe, the fortune had been lost. And they lived like the rest of us for a while. But then his father, George Hearst, made a second fortune in copper and gold.